Hola, hola. I'm Zulian Cruz Diaz, your Texas Rican host, and this is Una Preguntita. Each week, you and I take one big question and break it down to grow in this real and messy life we live in. From engineering to farming in Hawaii to running my own business, I have learned that life does not come with a manual, pero sí con preguntas, with questions. So, tell me, amigui, have you ever felt like you're thriving in one area of your life but lost in another? Yeah, been there too. Each week, you and I dive into the stuff nobody really teaches us: how to lead, connect, and communicate better, y con tools that you can actually use. Grab tu cafecito, get comfy, and let's figure this out together. Esto es Una Preguntita, where curiosity and understanding lead to action. Vamos! Okay, amigui. This week's preguntita is: why are some people heard and others not? You've seen it or maybe experienced it personally. You're in the same room, it's the same topic, you speak up, y nada. Someone else says the same thing and everybody's clapping and giving them all of the praise. For me, that is super frustrating. Why does this happen? What you and I are going to do today is we're going to break down what communication is, because it's not just what you say. So the way I like to think about communication is it's divided up into three parts. There's the words, there's the body language, and also the silent power player that we're actually going to dive into today is tone. So those three parts of communication again are words, body language, and tone. As we zoom into tone, tone is not just the way you say something, but it's actually how people feel. And the reason why we're getting into tone is because, like we do here on Una Preguntita, we dive into what we don't actually get taught, but we're expected to know. And so that's what we're going to go into today. Lucky for you, I have a virtual workshop coming up May 26th, Tuesday, May 27th, and Wednesday, May 28th. Don't worry, we'll talk more about that later on in this episode. Let's get back to the topic at hand, tone. So you've been told to maybe speak up more, take up more space, be more confident, right? Like own that room, but nobody tells us how to actually do that. You try to speak up, but you're overthinking your every word. You're second guessing maybe mid halfway through your sentence. And the worst is when your voice gets higher and higher and higher when you're unsure of what you're saying. And the result is that you leave conversations like, oh, why didn't I just say it differently? And you might be doing everything right, quote unquote right, but if your tone's off, your message doesn't land. This episode, Amigi, is for the high achiever. You and I, the perfectionist, the I've got things to say, but I don't feel heard crowd. You're not broken. You are not bad at speaking. You've just never been taught how to use tone. Just to make sure we're on the same page, mi amor, tone is not just how your voice sounds. Tone is how people feel your message. I'm talking to my high competent, low warmth people, the ones that want to be right. This is for you. Tone is how others feel with your message. Here's why tone might be working against you. So if you bring nervous energy into the room, people feel it before you even open your mouth. Have you ever had somebody come into a circle and you could just feel the tense energy that they're bringing in? That's part of tone. Okay, what about if you catch yourself in your head and you're not with the other person you're talking with? They feel that disconnect. I think the best example that actually comes from how tone comes into play and can actually really hinder our performance, our communication, our message that's coming across is by uptalk. Uptalk is essentially when you finish a sentence with a question mark at the end. So The best way to describe this up talk is pretend you come into a meeting to negotiate a new job, right? And you get the job, but you want to negotiate your pay or your vacation time, right? And so if you're negotiating your vacation time, you might end up saying, how about a vacation? Versus, how about a vacation? Or let's pretend you wanted to negotiate the amount of money that they're going to pay you. And let's say you want them to pay you $100,000. So one person that may use uptalk may say, how about $100,000? Versus somebody that says, how about $100,000? So do you see where that end of the sentence drops in tone versus goes up in a question mark, in a high up end? When we use uptalk, we use it because we're checking in with the other person to see if they're following, or we're asking for an affirmation. But what it actually does is it makes the other person question what you said. Our brains are still kind of primitive, and so our brains are automatically wired to scrutinize questions versus trust statements. So if you're going to say something like, how about $100,000? The other person is going to start to question it because they are taking it in as if it were a question, even though you really more meant it like a statement, like, I want $100,000 now. If you said it in a way where it sounds like a statement, the other person is not going to question and scrutinize it as much. The worst part about using uptalk is that you know your stuff, but it doesn't sound like it. So why is this important to know? When they were trying to study uptalk and the distinctions between if it really did affect your career or not, they took doctors that had the same amount of experience, the same amount of schooling, and what they did is that they ended up asking them to record their voice, not their face or anything, just their voice, record their name, their specialization, and what hospital they worked at. And so the doctors that ended up naturally talking with uptalk sounded like, pretend I'm one of them, sounded like, hi, my name is Julian Cruz Diaz, and I work in peds, and I work at this hospital. Versus the doctors that didn't use uptalk would sound something like, hi, my name is Julian Cruz Diaz. I work in peds, and I work at this hospital. When participants ended up rating if they thought the doctors were smart and likable versus not liked, there was an incredible distinction, an incredible split between the doctors that had uptalk versus didn't have uptalk. And what they ended up finding is that the doctors that ended up having the highest levels of not liked, which tended to be the doctors that had uptalk, had the highest levels of malpractice lawsuits. Why was that? Because they used uptalk. Uptalk, remember what we said, our brains begin to scrutinize and question what the other person is saying versus take what the doctor was saying as facts. So this is an example of how potentially the way in which you speak, right, your tone, the way that the message feels for the other person does really impact your career. Not just when you're negotiating, not just when you're at the supermarket, anywhere you go, it really does impact how you walk through the world and how others see you. Even if you're not a doctor, let's say you're trying to get a group's attention, or you're trying to lead a meeting, or you're trying to come in and bring in a pitch or a new idea or a new thought, depending on the tone in which you use your words and your body language, right? Communication is made up of words, body language, and tone. It will determine potentially if you get a promotion, potentially how others see you in your career, and it just leads to a lot of other things that we don't even realize. That's why learning about tone is so crucial. If you've hit any of these buckets or are feeling like you're stuck, unheard, and it's holding you back from growing in your career, I have a solution for you. I'm holding a virtual workshop called Say It Right, How to Be Heard, And we dive into the why, the how, and actually practice during the live workshop. It's an interactive game-based workshop where you'll be, yes, learning more about how to communicate clearly, but more importantly, it'll be a space for action-driven results versus just another workshop you attend and you take notes and then you file them away and never open them again. If you're tired of second guessing yourself after every meeting, wondering if you should have said it differently, or frustrated with not getting results, this is for you. The course, Say It Right, How to Be Heard, helps you stop shrinking and start standing in your voice. You'll learn the shifts that make people stop, make them tune in, and actually get what you're saying the first time around. The workshop dates are Monday, May 26th, Tuesday, May 27th, and Wednesday, May 28th. It is about time you get heard. Find the link in the show notes below in order to sign up. This is the course you really do need to take in order to keep ramping up in your career and actually be heard. So, Ami, why are some people heard and not others? Communication is divided up into those three parts. Número uno, words. Número dos, body language. Y tres, tone. Tone is the misunderstood powerhouse. The reason you're not being heard might not be what you're saying. It might be how you're saying it. Reminder, you are not broken. You just need the tools. If you're ready for those tools, make sure to sign up for the course, Say It Right, How to Be Heard, for the virtual course coming up May 26th all the way to May 28th.
Suri, ¿qué aprendiste hoy? What did you learn?
Titi, gracias por la pregunta. Mira, esta semana, this week, I've been realizing how strong miedo, fear, can be. I mean, the truth is I've been putting things off. Not because I don't want to do them, but because I'm scared. For example, this course that I just told you about a little earlier in the episode was something I'd been dreaming about for a couple of years now, and I'm just finally getting to release it out to the public. New things can be scary and intimidating, even for people who have been brave and done kind of big and scary things before. This last week was kind of weird. Like, have you ever been experiencing something, but you didn't quite know it yet? At least for me, an example is like when I'm hangry, I lash out, and then after I eat, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I was hangry. It was one of those feelings. I kept seeing topics of fear and uncertainty like everywhere. And so I knew I had to bring it onto the pod. This last week, I had a keynote speech where I talked to my old high school, which the topic was uncertainty. I had an interview, which will be coming in your feed soon, talking about uncertainty. And then I actually was listening to podcasts in my own feed, and they were all talking about like fear and uncertainty as well. And so I thought I'd bring it on and tell you the quote that really resonated with me. The quote was, "Instead of letting your emotions dictate your actions, let your actions dictate your emotions." That was by Og Mandino. I'm going to say that line again. Instead of letting your emotions dictate your actions, let your actions dictate your emotions. This was the epitome of me holding myself back from releasing this first virtual workshop. By the way, if you didn't hear me say it a billion times already, the signups are just down below in the show notes. I was letting my emotions, miedo, fear, dictate my actions, holding myself back from the workshop launch. Instead of the workshop, the action, lead my emotions, lead it into excitement or empowerment. One of the biggest takeaways I've learned as an entrepreneur is you don't have to feel fearless to move. You just have to move with fear. The more you try to organize all your ducks in a row before actually making a move, the more you're actually holding yourself back. Do it messy. You don't have to wait for clarity to act. Clarity comes after the action. That's the show, amigui. Si te gustó, if you liked it, make sure to share it, rate it, and write a review. ¿Qué aprendiste? What did you take away from today? Como siempre, I'm your amiga Zulian, and I am sending you off con un huge abrazo, amigui. Nos vemos en la próxima.